Hello and welcome back to the course. In this lecture, we're going to talk about working capital management. You will learn what working capital is and how to analyze the efficiency of using the working capital by a company. Let's go. First, let me explain to you what working capital is. If you have a business, then this business interacts with many different parties. You have to pay your suppliers, you have to have some inventory if you sell physical goods. On the other hand, some people owe you money in accounts receivable where you allow them to pay you later. So in the end, usually any business needs some money to be constantly in business. You have to sort of freeze some money in your business in order for this business to be functioning. This money that is frozen in your business is called working capital. This is the capital that you need for the company to work. So what does it consist of? The main components of working capital are your accounts receivable, your inventory, and your accounts payable. You need to manage it efficiently because if you lose control over your working capital, then you can suddenly discover that you do not have any money to run your business. So, how do you analyze your working capital? There are several ratios that help you determine your working capital cycle. The first one is receivable days. It's when you take your accounts receivable, divide it by sales, and you multiply it by 365. All those working capital ratios are usually measured in days, so that's why you divide it by the number of days in a year. You can take either an end-of-year accounts receivable value or some average value between 2 years. For inventory, you do the same thing. You take your inventory, divide it by cost of goods sold, not by sales, remember that, and multiply by 365. For payables, you do the same thing. You take your payables, divide them by COGS, and multiply by 365. So you will have several numbers of days. How can you interpret these days? What do they mean? In order to do your business, you have to store some inventory for a number of days. Then, after you sold this inventory, you wait for your money from customers for a number of days. If, for example, your inventory days is 20 days and then the receivables days is 30 days, then you have to finance your business for 50 days. But that is offset because you don't pay your suppliers at once. You also take time to pay your suppliers' bills, and this helps you to offset the money that people owe you through accounts receivable. So your payable days offsets this number. If your receivables days is 20 days, your inventory days is 30 days, if your payable days, let's say 15 days, then you only have to finance your business for 35 days. So it's going to be 35 days in total. 35 days is called your cash cycle. Let us calculate the ratios that we've just discussed for 3 major retailers. The first one is going to be Carrefour, a major European retail store network. The second is going to be Target, a large US chain of supermarkets. And the third one is going to be the largest retailer in the world, Walmart. If we calculate their cash cycle, their inventory days, receivables days, payables days, then you can learn quite interesting information about those companies. You see that for US retailers, their cash cycle is basically neutral. They have the inventory days of about 40 days for Walmart or about 55 to 60 days for Target, but their payables days actually match their inventory days. That means that they tell suppliers, okay, we pay you only when we sell your inventory. They do not purchase any inventory from their suppliers. They take it, sell it, and then they pay their suppliers. They do not need to freeze any capital as their working capital. If you take a look at Carrefour, Carrefour went even farther. They pay their suppliers 40 days after they sold their inventory. Suppliers finance Carrefour's growth. If Carrefour grows, then it basically gets some free money from its suppliers, and it can use this money to build new stores. So they do not have to take any new money as debt or from their shareholders to finance their growth. Their growth is self-financing, which is a brilliant idea. On the other hand, the gross margin of Carrefour is much lower than for Walmart or Target. Maybe this is the consequence of their policy, because when suppliers are paid later, they also have to somehow finance these additional 40 days. And what they do is that they just increase their prices for a couple of percentage points for Carrefour. And that is why Carrefour has a lower gross margin. Also, there is an interesting thing in comparing Target and Walmart. You see that inventory days for Walmart are much lower than for Target. They turn their inventory over much faster than Target. That is the essence of the business strategy for Walmart. They provide lower prices for fast-moving items, and that's why their inventory days are lower, and that's why their gross margins are a bit lower than Target's. They guarantee low prices for fast-moving items to their customers, and that is how they work. Also, take into account the fact that for Carrefour, their total cash cycle is negative, so probably their current assets are lower than their current liabilities. Their current ratio is lower than 1, but that is not a bad thing for them. That is actually a good thing for them, because that's part of their strategy. That's how they get money to finance their growth. Now, you should have an idea of how to analyze the efficiency of working capital management by a company. In the next lecture, we're going to talk about the new economy companies, how you can analyze companies which grow very rapidly, but generate losses throughout the whole history of their performance.